And what I want to talk to you about today is diseases and nematodes in 2021 and in 2022. I was given the title of A Perfect Storm, okay? You can follow me on Twitter if you want. I promise you on Twitter I don't put graveyards or stories. It's all about what growers may be interested in or not. Just a heads up on what we're looking at, going and working with the county agents as well. I'd like to recognize my research counterparts, Dr. Tim Brenneman and Dr. Albert Culbreth, who do a lot of the work you'll see today. The research has been done by them, and I build upon that as the extension specialist. So I looked this up. My title was given A Perfect Storm, and of course we all know, you may have seen the movie A Perfect Storm. You may recognize what a perfect storm is in terms of meteorological terms, all right? But the perfect storm we're talking about now, the perfect storm, if in fact it was one, that's a matter of your own personal opinion, but a perfect storm looking at 2021, and if we were to see one in 2022, what are we talking about? We're talking about the conditions that line up in my wheelhouse of disease and nematode management that make it nearly impossible to end up with the results we want to. And that is complete control of diseases and nematodes. And I would say it's not unfair to say that 2021 was a perfect storm in some reasons. And it's not unfair to expect that there are indicators that 2022 could be a perfect storm as well. So what do we in extension? What do I as an extension specialist, what does Dr. Harris do as an extension specialist? Our job is to, Scott, whether we are right or wrong in predicting, is to anticipate what might happen, and then to help you with strategies, research-based strategies, in order to mitigate that perfect storm. So why would we use the term perfect storm in 2021? I don't know, you may disagree. There may be growers in the state who said it was the best year I've ever had. But from a disease standpoint, from my wheelhouse, why would I say that? The first thing is, as Dr. Monfort just showed, it didn't always rain. It did not rain every single day, but it sure rained a lot. And what rain does is it gives conditions, it makes conditions throughout the entire season favorable for our fungal diseases. That rain, those frequent rains, it not only created conditions which were favorable for infection and development and spread of disease, but it also kept our farmers out of the field from making timely applications. If you're on a 14-day schedule and you can't get in the field for 21 days, there's going to be consequences with that. And also there's inadequate leaf drying time, because in order to get great control, and I'll talk about this later, you have to have the right product, you have to have the right time, and you have to be able to put the product out so that you get the right drying time. For a lot of growers in 2021, we simply did not have that in the perfect storm. The acres planted. Now, if my figure was 800,000 plus, I'll go with what Scott says, 748,000. That doesn't matter. It was a lot of peanut acres in the state of Georgia. And what happens when you have a lot of peanut acres? Your rotation suffers. If you plant 700 to 800,000 acres of peanuts, that probably means some of your acreage is on shorter rotations, peanuts behind peanuts more often than you would like. And when we do that, we get more disease. Okay? What was the length of the time between crops planted? What was the impact on disease nematodes? And then the last one, as far as the perfect storm. The sexiest group of fungicides out there right now belong to what we call in shorthand the SDHI class. The SDHI class. And we are becoming increasingly familiar with and reliant. And I'll use the term over-reliant, because I think if you take the shorter rotations, the weather we had, and relying on a single class to carry a lot of weight, bad things can happen. It could be a perfect storm. The struggles from the 2021 season related to that perfect storm, the rain, saw a lot of late leaf spot. Corey, when you were a graduate student, we taught more about white mold than we did leaf spot. Now it's changed. Late leaf spot has become more and more important. In fact, I would say the disease that came out of last year, more important than any, was late leaf spot. The impact on the timing of those fungicides, the white mold control. My takeaways from 2021 is there is no single best. If you came in here, and I'll steal some of Glenn's thunder, he's got a bullet slide that says a silver bullet. If you are looking for a silver bullet in disease management, we don't have one. We have a lot of good bullets, a lot of good ammunition, but there's no single one. Late leaf spot has emerged as the single greatest threat as far as disease that we are struggling with as far as new and innovation to it. Wane white mold will always be difficult to control, but late leaf spots come on the scene saying, where did that come from? And the use of right products. Is 2022 going to be a perfect storm? I don't know. I don't know, but I can say there's already indicators of things we have to watch for. If I was a peanut grower, Danny Colvin, I'll tell you what I would do. Things I would be worried about here. What's going to be the impact of a La Nina? Scott's already said he expects a cooler, wetter spring. That's not what a La Nina would bring, so we'll see who's right and who's wrong. Probably you. I'm always wrong on that. Cost of, I know. Help somebody else next time, all right? Cost of fertilizer. Glenn will talk about that. How will that impact not only what we put on the peanut crop, but also what other crops will be planted or not planted? And how will that impact our acreage? Will we see more acres in 2021? I heard this question asked to Donald Chase a few minutes ago, and I heard Donald Chase take a deep breath before he asked what the peanut acreage will do in 2022. We'll have to wait and see. Anticipated shortages of fungicides and increased costs. Now, this is real. Because of all the things with supply chains, we can expect lower availability of some of the critical fungicides we use, and we can expect to pay more for what fungicides we have. That just means we have to be smarter. Diseases don't care what a fungicide costs. We have to fight them anyway. And then again, how are we going to deal with our reliance or over-reliance upon SDHIs and strobilurins? Let's talk about La Nina for a minute. I'm always wrong, but this was January the 14th, 2022. I don't know what it looks like right now, but the left-hand picture of cotton blooming was right here within a half a mile of where you're sitting right now. And the regrowth in the cotton was in Mitchell County. We have conditions where we have not had enough cold weather. Not enough cold weather makes regrowth happen, builds nematode problems, affects our diseases for the coming season. If we continue in a La Nina situation, La Nina is characterized in the southeast by warmer than normal conditions, not every day, maybe not every 2 days, but overall average warmer temperatures and drier weather. We can look at this. If it does, we can have an impact on nematodes. Why? Nematodes will be able to continue to build more than they would have under a normal winter. I'm concerned about what the impact of these kind of conditions where we still have green tissue in the field, we have regrowth cotton. I know it's not a cotton meeting, but where we have these kind of conditions, what's it going to do for thrips? How is it going to impact our tomato spotted wilt virus coming in? Having a warmer winter is not a friend for anybody in this room if you grow peanuts, okay? Because of the disease problems, the nematode problems, the potential for tomato spotted wilt virus. Could we be delayed in planting? Could we have problems with fumigation if we want to put telone out? Diseases like Aspergillus crown rot, they could be worse. The take-home message on this is not that you remember everything I said. The take-home message is that you recognize the environment that we experience this winter, whether Scott's right or I'm right, will have an impact on your diseases and nematodes and peanuts in 2022, and whether we have a perfect storm or not is based upon, in large part, what's already beginning to happen. And just anticipate that and plan for it. We'll talk about now opportunities. As we move into 2022, as we move into what will or won't be a perfect storm, we have to anticipate and prepare for it. An opportunity, a lot of things in peanut disease and nematode management comes one time. And when you close that furrow, you have made a lot of management decisions that you cannot go back and fix, at least easily. So you want to make sure you take the opportunity to learn what the potential is and move from there. Scott mentioned tomato spotted wilt virus. Okay, we're celebrating 25 years of the Georgia peanut disease, or the tomato spotted wilt risk index. For 25 years, it has been refined and improved upon. And tomato spotted wilt virus is still here. But 25 years, we know that if you manage your spotted wilt, the right variety, the right planting date, the right seeding rate, what you put in furrow, your tillage, we can mitigate this to where your losses are minimized. If you don't make those changes, if you don't take that into consideration, it could cost you significant yield that you cannot recover from during the season. Why am I concerned about tomato spotted wilt virus this year? When we've seen a general decline, the black line shows the level of loss to tomato spotted wilt virus over the past since 1990. We're seeing a decline in recent years. I'm concerned about the weather we have, the weather we don't have, the climate, and what that might mean for tomato spotted wilt virus. So please follow the Peanut RX. Follow your risk index. I know some of the companies, Wayne, I know Nichino's already got cards out here that we can use. Look and see what the index says. Make the kind of measurements you need, this kind of strategy you need to mitigate against that. We've also got it at www.peanutrx.org. We've got online tools that you can use. It talks about the risk index. It talks about the diseases. It gives you examples. It gives you an opportunity to use this as well. Use Peanut RX as a tool to mitigate what 2022 might mean, what it might bring for growers, not only for spotted wilt, but for white mold and leaf spot as well. Let's talk about seedling diseases. Scott talked about seedling diseases. In 2020, after the 2019 very hot and dry season condition, and Dr. Brenneman, thank you for this slide that you've provided for me, okay? What we can say is after 2019, we ran into tremendous problems with seedling diseases, right? The growing conditions we had in 2021, going into 2022, our seed sources, our seed quality should be pretty good. We did not have the same one, but we do have these and other seedling diseases we need to prepare for. Going into 2022, recognize that we have probably theoretically three seed treatments that might be out there in some capacity or another. Rancona. Rancona has become the dominant seed treatment on peanuts largely because of its ability to fight Aspergillus flavus and Niger, which we saw after 2019. Most seed this year will probably be treated with Rancona. There may be Syngenta's also bringing Trebuchet out. That may be available in some limited quantity, will also be available in the future. So as you have the opportunity, my only point here is not that you remember there's three, not that you remember what the makeup is. My point is that you take an active role in recognizing that what's put on your seed before you plant can go a long way in reducing your risk to some of these important diseases. Aspergillus niger, seedling blight, and other ones. Take an active role in recognizing what was put on my seed and how effective do I think it will be. In-furrow fungicides. And again, when we're talking about in-furrow fungicides, when we're talking about what this year might bring, what conditions might be favorable for cylindricalated blackright, for seedling diseases, those things, in-furrow fungicides are another line of defense. And just recognize that whether it's the azoxystrobin, the Abound that we've used in the past, Proline or Vellum, all of them have impact not only on the potential for diseases, but maybe also nematodes as well. So my suggestion is recognize going into 2022 what tools are available to you. What tools are available to you to fight spotted wilt? What tools are available to you to make sure you get the best stand that you can have? What tools are available to you to mitigate some of the diseases like Aspergillus crown rot, CBR, or early season white mold? You don't have to remember all the options, just know they're there. Some are better than others. The point is to recognize in a perfect storm why you might wish you had the tools you do. CBR is one of the diseases that we haven't seen a whole lot of in recent years, but again, when you close that furrow, you've closed the furrow on seedling diseases, you've closed the furrow on tomato spotted wilt virus, you've closed the furrow on things like CBR, and you've closed the furrow in large part on nematodes. And I can tell you again that if we have warmer conditions like we've had thus far, warmer conditions during the wintertime will probably translate into greater problems with nematodes. When I started here in 2000, when I talked about peanuts and nematodes, I was talking primarily about, on the right-hand side, a picture of peanut root knot nematode, okay? Going into 2022, we recognize that there's strong evidence to indicate that the lesion nematode on the left-hand side, black freckles on those pods, which can also be associated with the pegs and possibly with weak peg strength, okay? So as you go in thinking about what 2022 will bring, you have the opportunity early in the season to make decisions that can either take these and make them minor problems in the field or can make them problems in the field from which you cannot recover. Another slide from Dr. Brenneman and what he calls a green island effect. And you can see in this slide, you can pick out where we have used nematode resistant varieties, probably Tifgar, Georgia 14N, or TIF-NV High-OL. In 2022, TIF-NV High-OL will be the premier root knot nematode variety we have in peanuts. And you can pick in that picture out where we have the resistant variety planted versus where we have a susceptible Georgia 06G with a nematicide. You get one choice and one chance. And when you close that furrow, if you have a problem with nematodes, if you have not used a resistant variety and you have not used sufficient nematicide, there is almost no recovery from that. And because of the weather we're having, I'll iterate that one more time, and it'll probably snow tomorrow here and get icy, right? But what we have right now are all indications are we're setting up for where nematodes, whether it's peanuts or cotton or corn or soybeans, to be more severe. Our arsenal of nematicides on peanuts continues to increase. We still have Telone, as you might imagine. We've got the liquid formulation Vellum. We've got Propulse that can be used later in the season to protect those pods and pegs against further nematode damage. Aglogic, Aldicarb, the active ingredient that was used to be in Timic. Now we have Aglogic. Aglogic is back and strong, and the company is very aggressively working to find ways that you can use it, be available to you. And of course, Vidate. Less data on Vidate, but I know that there's a push to get more and more growers to consider how Vidate might fit into a program. What I can tell you is do something. Don't miss the opportunity. If something's been successful for you in the past, continue to use it. But before you make changes, I would urge you to talk with your county agents or talk with UGA Extension to ask, where is the data? Where's the data to support the changes you might make? Fungicides. I won't go over one of these fungicides. These are not necessarily new. Some of these fungicides have been out there for a while. The main thing to say is we have an ever-expanding arsenal of fungicides for use on peanut. And that's good because of the significant losses our growers experience to peanut diseases every year. White mold, leaf spot, nematodes, aspergillus crown rot, a lot of different diseases out there. The thing to remember, though, is as you look at some of these fungicides, which have probably not been out there for more than 5 years, some have not been out there for 2 years, what I want you to recognize is we don't have new classes of chemistry. All these new fungicides that you see, whether it's Excalia from Valent for white mold control, Provosol from BASF for leaf spot control, Andiamo Advanced from SIPCAM. Yes, these are different chemistries, but they're all in the same classes. And as I mentioned earlier, this class, the SDHI class, the Excalia that you see here, we are relying more and more and more upon that single class of chemistry. And what happens when you rely more and more and more on a single class of chemistry? If you don't make call audibles, if you don't check at the line and make sure you incorporate other chemistries in there, resistance will develop. Okay? General supply for fungicides in 2022. Most of our fungicides, I've been told, okay, Scott didn't tell me, so he doesn't know, but I heard it from other people. Scott, I talk to people other than you. I just want you to know that. I got a pipeline of people I talk to, right? But because of the pipeline concerns, we can say that most fungicides will be increased in cost. That's no supply. Most of our premium fungicides, most of our name brand fungicides that come from the companies you know and trust are likely to be in a fair amount of supply. We should not have a problem getting them if our acreage stays about what we expect it to. One thing that may not happen is you can't buy all you want today that you're going to need for the rest of the season. That's not how the fungicide supply works. It works by, as you move through the season, the fungicides you need are generally there. So don't go out and hoard right now. That doesn't help anybody. But recognize for the most part, we should not expect a problem with these. We should not expect a problem with chlorothalonil either. Chlorothalonil is a backbone of a lot of programs. We shouldn't expect a shortage of that. But in tight supply are examples. And again, I am prognosticating, I'm predicting, but from what I've heard, these fungicides may be in tighter supply. Priaxor from BASF, which is used not only in peanut, but used in cotton, used in corn, important fungicide. But more concerning to me, azoxystrobin, pyraclostrobin, and tebuconazole. Why do I care that those 3 fungicides may be in short supply? Because we use a lot of them, because they're a lot of times used in generic formulations, which makes them something that we can fit in between other more expensive fungicides, something that we use very often. I would say there's probably not many peanut growers in Georgia who don't use at least one of these fungicides at least once or twice in the season. Okay? And so again, we have to be aware that they may be in shorter supply. So what would I tell you? What would I tell you? What would I tell you if you cannot get the fungicide you're expecting, right? The first thing is the Peanut RX we talked about early. Use Peanut RX to determine the level of threat across your fields. Rodney, not every field is the same, right? A field that's got 3 years out of peanuts and 1 year out of peanut, you might be able to treat them differently. Treat the fields according to the risk. Put your biggest guns, the biggest ammunition where you need it. If you can't get enough of everything you want, use what the best is where you need it most. Second, tailor your fungicide programs. Okay? Depending upon what your risk is, if you're at low risk, you may decide to change your fungicide program because you've got more opportunity to use it. If you've got a high-risk field or extremely high-risk field, you may have fewer options, and you need to make sure you do that. And the third is have a contingency plan. If you absolutely think at 60 days after planting you're going to use brand X because you always have and you're going to use it, what if you can't get it? You better know what Y and Z would be. So come up with a contingency plan. Let's talk a little bit about white mold in 2022. Okay? One of the silver linings, it may have been a perfect storm in a lot of ways in 2021, but 2021 for a lot of growers, not everywhere, not every field, but in general, white mold was a little bit easier to control. If you remember Scott's slide from June of 2021, the map he showed, it showed that we were cooler, okay, and we were wetter. And a lot of times being cooler temperatures and the mechanical beating down action of rainfall actually can slow the growth and development of white mold. White mold was still an important problem, but not the problem that it was in 2019 or in 2020 when the slide was made. The take-home point when we're talking about a perfect storm, when you are preparing for the worst-case situation, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, okay? Recognize that the newer fungicides we have for management of white mold are better. This is on a scale, this is 200 out on a scale of 200. This is out of a field in Cook County just south of here. Here's our tebuconazole program with 67. Tebuconazole is inexpensive, more so this year, but inexpensive. It's one a lot of growers use. But if you go from the tebuconazole this way, what you will see is our new improved chemistries for fighting white mold. In fact, if you go all the way to the far left, what you will see is the Elatus, the Excalia, the Umbra, some of our newest white mold materials. You can see the difference between using newer products versus tebuconazole, which has been out there since 1994. Okay? And what's that translate into yield? Here is that tebuconazole program under a high-risk situation. Now, we'll see a field where it did very well, but under high risk, these newer products since 1994 are worth the investment. So as you're preparing for a perfect storm, as you're preparing for perhaps shorter rotations, as you're preparing for weather that's less or more favorable for white mold, what you can see is investing in newer products with greater activity. It may cost you more, but you certainly make the money up in terms of profit. What has happened to leaf spot? Okay? What's happened to leaf spot? It hasn't been too many peanut farm shows ago where this was an afterthought. I would talk to you about nematodes, I would talk to you about white mold, I would talk to you about anything but leaf spot because nobody came here to talk about leaf spot, except for the people selling fungicides for leaf spot, right? Okay, what's happened? Right? Well, there has been a shift. There have always been obstacles to leaf spot control. Jerry, this isn't just from 2021. This isn't just from 2020, okay? A late start on a fungicide program is a recipe for disaster with leaf spot. Getting behind on a fungicide program, as we would have in 2021, if you can't get in the field and you can't get an airplane, you can't get in there, there's nothing you can do, okay? But there's something else too. Getting behind can be even worse in a year like 2021. Because it's no secret, there's at least one program out there that says, you spray my products at 60 days and 90 days, you go 28 days, you go 30 days, you'll be good to go. But what happens if during that period of time the weather changes, the weather's bad, and you can't get back in? So it's not just being delayed, it's now we have the opportunity to use stretched intervals, extended intervals, and that can bring problems as well. Too much rain, compromised efficacy of our fungicides. It's no doubt that tebuconazole, the old Folicure, isn't on leaf spot at what it used to be. Abound, azoxystrobin is not what it used to be. Pyraclostrobin, headline, is not what it used to be. We have to hope that our newer chemistries are also, we can protect them, okay? Again, that over-reliance on a single chemistry. Now, this is a little bit hard to read, but this is some of the trials, and again, walking through a minefield, what's the best thing to do is just grab some cards, grab some slides that your cooperators, your colleagues are already using. So this one came from Syngenta, but this is a UGA trial in Bullock County, up around Statesboro. And we have trials from programs. These are the programs requested of us by companies like SIPChem, Bayer, FMC, Corteva, Nichno, Syngenta, BAS, Valent. Okay? Hunt, this is what you all asked us to put in there for Valent. Okay? I've got 2 red arrows there. And a lot of what's been going out lately is a Syngenta program. If you use Mirabis and Elatus and you go out there and spread 28 days, the first application is 65 days, a second application at 90 days, and then you stretch another 28 days, okay? When we look at what happened with yields last year, in this trial in Bullock County where we had very little disease pressure, we had very little leaf spot, we had very little white mold, that stretched interval, the amount of leaf spot was a 1.2. Follow that column, you can see we were very successful spraying 5 times. Low disease pressure, low white mold. The other thing you can see is just because tebuconazole In this situation, Tebustar plus chlorothalonil may not be the most expensive, it may not be the best, but in a low-risk situation, it can perform very, very well. Low-risk situation, no problem with any of our fungicide programs, no problem with stretching intervals. Now let's jump ahead to a high-risk situation. A lot more rain. This is in southwest Georgia. This is in southwest corner of the state. And what I have done is I put in yellow and highlighted in yellow that same program where we stretched the interval for 28 days. Now what happened in those 28 days? I can promise you one thing. I can't tell you on what day it rained, but I can promise you that on more than one day, and perhaps in association with applications, there was rainfall during that period of time. And when you stretch intervals in a year like we had last year, it puts a lot of pressure on the fungicides we have. And what you see happened here is in this situation, a 6 or a final leaf spot rating comes out to about 50% defoliated. If you remember the one in Bullock County, that was a 1. That means we couldn't hardly find any leaf spots. Take that same program, put it in a different environment, have the kind of environment under a stretch interval, and you go from having to hunt for a spot to begin with to 50% of the leaves are gone. That's what happens, what we have to be aware of. When we stretch intervals, it doesn't mean we can't do it, but it means we have to be aware of it. Now here's the most important thing. That 6 means 50% of the leaves were gone at the end of the season. If you'll come over to this column right here, what was the yield with 50% leaf loss? This grower still made 7,000 plus pounds, okay? The take-home message is this. Using extended intervals under the environment we had in a perfect storm may hurt your feelings as far as leaf spot goes, okay? But the current varieties we have resilience to what that leaf spot loss might mean, okay? So let's talk about, again, since we're pointing at the extended intervals, let's talk about a Syngenta program here. I'm not here to sell Syngenta, it just recognizes what the opportunities are. If as a grower, you have used stretched intervals, extended intervals, Danny, and you're not satisfied with 28 days and you say you'll never do it, I've heard through the grapevine you'll never do that again, all right? What I'm saying is, if you can't stomach that, don't do it. Don't do it. Put whatever program you have, make sure you've got on a 14-day schedule. A 14-day schedule has worked for you, and use it, right? But we can show you the data, even where we have stumbled, even where the leaf spot isn't where we want to go. If you use the right products at the right time, yes, you may see more defoliation than you thought you would have, but you can still make top yields. Stay the program, make sure that what your expectations are going to be realized. When we talk about fungicides in general, we have never had a greater arsenal. What's the benefits of our arsenal? We have more products to use than we've ever had before. What's the downside of every fungicide you see up on that screen right now? Every fungicide on that screen is one of 3 classes of chemistry with perhaps some chlorothalonil mixed in there as well. We have a lot of products, but we have a lot of products which are potentially at risk if we do not manage them effectively. One reason for showing you this, right? On the plus side, we can see from Albert Colbert's work that if you use vellum in furrow, okay? You can see that in the lower gray line. If you use that in furrow through 90 days after planting, you are still seeing a benefit on leaf spot from something you did before you closed the furrow. If you use Thimet in furrow for thrips control, for tomato spotted wilt spot control, you can still see some benefit as late as 96 days after planting. That does not mean, read me, listen to me, all right, hear me. This does not mean you start your fungicide program at 96 days, you will be sorely disappointed. This is just simply showing that we're getting benefit out of things like an in-furrow vellum application as late as 90 days in the season. What's the risk? That's a good thing, right? What's the risk? Vellum is in that sexy SDHI class. And so if from the beginning of the season, from the time we plant, we're using a single class of chemistry that has impact on leaf spot, if we do not manage that carefully, we're going to run into problems. Okay? This is from a 2020 season. How are we going to manage it? My message is this: if we do not want over-reliance, all right? What you can see in this arrow with this aqua bar, this is the amount of leaf spot. This was in a Provo Silver program. Provo Silver is a combination of prothioconazole and tebuconazole, 2 triazoles with slightly different ways of working. What we've seen is, we see in this situation where we reintroduce triazole chemistries that we haven't used before or have not used as often. We introduce them into programs where we're using SDHIs and strobilurins. They can help us. They can help us to manage leaf spot control. Trial from BASF, and you'll see there in the orange bar there. Okay? This is a combination of their new their new triazole, Provosol, plus tebuconazole. And you can see with that orange bar the comparison in leaf spot control when you introduce into other programs that combination of a strong triazole with the tebuconazole. It helps us in managing leaf spot in programs where we may have over-reliance on other chemistries. So a take-home point for Perfect Storm is recognize some of the chemistries you may not have been using as much in the past. You may not have used Provo Silver in the past at all. You may not have ever used Provosol plus tebuconazole. Recognize that there's opportunity to protect your fungicide programs. Okay? I want to show you again, this is going back to 2021. This is a trial where we saw a 50% defoliation where we use that stretched interval. I want you to look down here in gray. Okay? This is a program where, for whatever reason, we went with, rather than 3 Fontellus, we went with 4 Fontellus applications. And that 4th Fontellus application is an SDHI. It was made late in the season. Okay? And we see that the leaf spot control went from to an 8.2, which is pretty much of a disaster on leaf spot control. What's an indication? This is not an indication that we don't have a good program from Corteva. The indication here is that we cannot over-rely on that SDHI that we have with the Fontellus. We need to be careful. And if you look at the bottom, you can see where the Provosol plus Deb was put in the programs. At the top of the Provo Silver, you can see we had some of the best leaf spot control in the beginning. Okay? Takeaway point is, in a perfect storm, make sure you have the right fungicides. About to finish up. Okay? If Albert Culbreth was here, and I'm not sure he's here, but if he was, he would say, what about sulfur? Okay? Sulfur, as we're looking for ways in which that we can protect these chemistries we have, the strobilurin chemistries, the triazole chemistries, the SDHI chemistries, sulfur, if we're using the kind of products that we see here circled, these are ones that have been tested, size matters, the particle size matters. If we're using these products at a rate between 2.5 and 5 pounds per acre, when mixed with some of these products we're worried about, they can help to rejuvenate, help to bring back, help to protect the leaf spot control we expect. An example of that is this, okay? We can see in the 13, an Approach Prima Fontellus program, which relies upon Approach Prima at the end of the season. Approach Prima by itself is somewhat wounded. But look what happens when Albert mixed 5 pounds of sulfur with that Approach Prima. We went from close to 50% defoliated to a few spots on the leaves. One way to protect is to rotate chemistries. Another way to protect is the use of some specific applications of sulfur. Okay? Leaf spot control in a perfect storm will be more difficult. Why? The weather we have, the rotation we don't have, the kind of fungicides we're over-relying upon, and the fungicide programs where we may be stretching intervals. We can manage all of that by being careful with what we do. Make top yields, but it does require timely harvest. We may not have perfect leaf spot control, but we want to be timing our harvest. We can use extended intervals, but you have to do it smart. Not every field is going to benefit from an extended interval, no matter what fungicide program you use. Triazole fungicides. When we talk about Provo Silver, when we talk about Provosol plus tebuconazole, fungicides that, I'll be honest with you, I'm the last person in the world who ever thought we should mix the tebuconazole with Provosol. But I would have thought that about Provo Silver as well. But using the fungicide programs that we have now, they help to bring stuff back. And then sulfur can be a benefit as well. Last thing I'm going to say is, when I first started, we were harvesting Georgia's greens 135 days after we plant them. Scott, some of our Georgia 6Gs, some of our newer varieties are going 150 days. When I started, a leaf spot fungicide program, a white mold fungicide program ended about 120 days. These days, with the yields we're expecting, you have got to consider as a grower that your fungicide program does not stop at 120 days. You've probably got another application in there to make. And make sure when you're deciding, I'm not the police, but make sure whatever fungicide program you're using, make sure that it's effective, make sure that you've considered your pre-harvest intervals, make sure that you're considering the resistance management with that. I want to thank Tim Brenneman and Albert Culbreth. They're the ones who feed me the ammunition. They're the ones who do a lot of the research that I then build upon as far as extension goes. They're great cooperators, great friends. And with that, walking through a minefield, I'd be happy to answer any questions if I got any time left. All I ask is not that you remember every single point, but you remember the issues moving into 2022 we're going to face.